Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our lectures on the Exalted Treatise on the response of the Tao. Today, we'll be looking at this passage. This is becoming a very familiar passage. We'll be focusing on the latter part of the sentence. So, sentences be faithful, filial, friendly, and fraternal. So, we'll focus on the be friendly and fraternal part. Now, this actually relates to the relationship between siblings. What does it mean to be friendly and fraternal? Well, those two words in Chinese denote the moral duties between older siblings and younger siblings. And we'll look at in a moment what exactly is involved in being a dutiful, responsible older sibling. Naturally, some people might be both an older and a younger sibling if they're born in the middle of their family. So they will have two hats on. What about people who are an only child? They don't have any siblings. Well, interestingly, this passage, including the former part, also applies to them because the same dynamics apply to their relationship with their peers. Our peers, you can think of it in terms of our classmates, our cousins, our colleagues. So just because the person might not have any siblings, doesn't mean that they can't be friendly and fraternal in their interpersonal relationships. Okay. Now, what's special about the sibling relationship? Well, siblings tend to spend a great deal of time with each other. It's actually been research in the US that's shown that siblings spend more time with each other than with their parents and with their peers. It's quite interesting. These US studies, they take, home interviews that are ongoing and, a series of consecutive nightly telephone interviews. And there's two studies in particular that I have in mind. There's one with over 200 families of school-aged children, and the children are aged between 8 and 11 years old. And then there's another study that's also fairly significant that involved 240 pairs of adolescent siblings. And the researchers, these scholars in human development and family studies, but they found that, these children, whether they were, the younger batch between, on average, the ages of 8 and 11, or the adolescents, they found that these children spend more out-of-school time with their siblings than with anyone else, including their parents and friends. And this is, even after taking into account variations in terms of, whether it's weekdays or weekends and, time during the school term or during the holidays. So that's what they found. It's quite really interesting. Now that's, during childhood, as a young adult, but actually over a lifetime, a person will ultimately share the most years of their life with their siblings. From my own experience, I remember attending a friend's 21st birthday party. One of my friends called Victoria, and I knew her from law school at university. And, it was a rather large party. There were many people invited. It was obviously a special occasion. But most of those people I had never met before. I only knew Victoria through our days at law school. So, but there were a lot of people, and what everyone had in common was that we all knew Victoria through some, shared experience or course or other activity. So, she had invited friends from her primary school years, her secondary school. There were some friends from work, her work colleagues, because she also worked part-time. I remember there were friends from her rowing and her Japanese classes, because she learned Japanese, and many others. And, while I was talking to someone, not everyone could talk to Victoria at the same time. So, I was talking to one of the other people at the party, someone I hadn't met before. And as we were talking, I remember asking this person, so, how long have you known Victoria? And you know what they said? They said, I've known Victoria all her life. And it turns out that it was actually Victoria's older brother. And I'd never met her older brother before. And they didn't look very much like each other at all, at least not to me. Okay, well, according to World Bank statistics, the average life expectancy for those living in the UK is just over 80 years. So if we do the maths, let's say a person's parents will be 20, 30 years older than them, generally, and they meet their spouse maybe in their 20s or 30s. So this means with an average life expectancy of just over 80 years, this means that they get to spend roughly 50 or 60 years with their parents and their spouse. But their siblings will be, could be a few years younger or a few years older, or even, the same age, like twins. So they get to know their siblings for over 70 years, for most of their lifetime, you could say. So it's no surprise that relationships between siblings tend to be the longest lasting, the last sort of longer than other relationships that we might have in our life. And you could say, well, friendships might come and go. We're sort of stuck with our siblings, aren't we? So siblings are, for most people, their longest relationships, lasting from early childhood through to old age. Now, I'll just stop sharing the slide. Now, given the extensive time that siblings have together, there are countless opportunities for them to learn from one another. They're able to observe and examine their similarities and differences, and be influenced by each other's choices and conduct. You could say that siblings sort of know us inside out. Siblings share so many experiences that can be very meaningful and impactful to their lives. After all, they sort of grow up in the same environment within the family. They share the same parents, for example. They share common memories and similar experiences. So research undertaken by psychologists show that these long-lasting relationships are more critical than most people think. And I'd like to share with you this quote that I found. Go back to my slides. It's a little bit long, but in early childhood, close everyday contact coupled with emotional intensity fostered the development of social understanding, and social support from siblings plays a role in adjustment beginning in childhood. For instance, sibling warmth and support is linked to peer acceptance and social competence, academic engagement, and educational attainment. Although the amount of sibling contact diminishes as children age, as they grow up and move out of their parents' homes, these sibling relationships continue to influence adult well-being. In fact, the quality of sibling relationships is one of the most important long-term predictors of mental health in old age. So that sort of gives us an idea of the long-term impact of our siblings, our relationship with our siblings, lasting from early childhood through to old age, as we said. Okay. Now, interestingly, the terms sisterhood and brotherhood are used to connote cohesion and support, even in individuals who may not be biologically related. So, and when we look at the Chinese word for siblings, the Chinese word is pronounced shouzu, and it literally means hands and feet. You might be thinking that's a curious way to refer to our brothers and sisters. Well, it basically captures the close bond between our siblings. The idea is that siblings are and should remain as one entity. The siblings are to work together, support each other, and look out for each other as members of the same family. Now, some people might be wondering, well, how can two or more siblings, they're individuals, right? How can they be thought of as one entity? Well, certainly sometimes siblings can be identified as one entity, just like when people say, the Jones brothers, or, the twins in class, and they fully expect you to know who they're referring to. And sometimes siblings might look rather alike, and so people have difficulty trying to tell them apart, even if they're not identical twins. So that's part of how they're sort of considered as one entity by the people around them. And I think, sometimes when one sibling makes a mistake, the other siblings can be sort of tarred by association. So all the siblings end up copying the flag. Now, unlike friends, the number of siblings is ultimately finite. So for those who are lucky enough to have siblings, you might think of your siblings as sort of limited editions. And that's, I suppose, all the more reason to, look out for each other and, try not to let things like disagreements, conflicts, tensions, what other people might have to say, get in the way of this very special family relationship, this bond between brothers and sisters. Okay, so the question is, how do we treat our siblings well? What does it mean to be a dutiful sibling? Well, as we might remember, the Exalted Treatise tells us to be friendly and fraternal. And the friendly part actually applies to how an older sibling treats their younger brother or sister. And the fraternal part applies to how a younger sibling treats their older brother or sister. Now, if we look at how the character for friend, we'll focus today on the first part, being a friendly older sibling, what that involves. I'll just share my screen again. If we look at how the character, this is on the left, is how the Chinese character for friend is written today, and that's how we read it in the Exalted Treatise. And on the right, what's encircled is how the character used to be written. And it's made up of two hands. There's three fingers drawn to represent all five, because three in Chinese, as in many other cultures, represents sort of plural, more. So they're actually two hands, and they're a bit like a person's right and left hands. So our two hands will instinctively work together and help each other out. So let's say, one hand finds something a little bit heavy to lift, while the other hand will immediately, instinctively help out. If one hand is injured in some way, well, the other hand will try to, comfort or help it feel better, get well soon. So just seems to happen, it's quite easy to understand with our hands, seems to happen without even thinking about it. It's instinctive. In the same way, siblings are to help each other out in whatever way they can. In any given situation, if you think about it, One sibling might be more able in terms of physical ability, or they might know a bit more in relation to a certain subject or topic, or they might be more experienced at doing something, or they could just pay more attention to the details. Well, this means that they can cultivate good deeds by helping out their brothers and sisters. Now, this is often the older sibling who's able to do that, especially when the children are young. But clearly that doesn't have to be the case. Obviously depends on the situation and the required skills or knowledge, ability involved. Now, we go to the next slide. We notice that there are two hands, but more than that, these two hands are sort of facing the same direction. So for me, it sort of reminds me of when people are, like as in the photo, pulling on the same side in a tug of war. Siblings being born into the same family, they're naturally one team. And as I say, the word team, TEAM, is actually an acronym for together, everyone achieves more. Okay, so the question for an older sibling now is how they can be a good friend to their younger siblings. We have a sense of what this idea of friend, being friendly, is. And what does it mean to be a good friend? What are some day-to-day examples? Now, for our ease of reference, I've sort of divided these examples into three broad categories. The first category is sort of the caregiving role. And this is where the older sibling can start by looking out for the health and safety of their younger siblings. Obviously, the needs of their younger siblings will change as they grow and learn. So when the younger sibling is very young, maybe just an infant, this might involve, making sure that they don't fall over or bump into sharp corners. And when they're a bit older, it might involve reminding them to eat more vegetables and less of the lollies, showing them how to tie their shoelaces. Later on, it might involve how to safely cross the road. And then still later on, it could be keeping a healthy posture in front of the computer. How to keep that posture, giving them advice on how to drive safely, how to park the car. So what we need to do as an older sibling will depend on the needs of our younger siblings, and they change as they develop. Well, actions ultimately speak louder than words. So the older sibling has to model these safe and healthy behaviours themselves to be able to lead by example. And yes, it can be difficult sometimes. So let's imagine that you really feel like eating a cookie. Well, unfortunately, you know that if you start snacking on that junk food, it's highly likely that your younger brother will want to do the same. So this scenario sort of illustrates that an older sibling has to think twice about the choices that they make, because those choices can help or harm more than one person. One time, I remember my sister and I were at a playground, and it was one of those rare playgrounds that had a rock climbing wall. I can't remember exactly how old we were. We were definitely sort of under 10. I think maybe I was around 8 or 9 years old. And my sister, who's 4 years younger than me, would have been, say, about 4 or 5. And I was, keen to explore this rock climbing wall. But I remember my mum telling me, be careful not to climb too high. Don't climb all the way to the top because 2 reasons. One is I might get into difficulties trying to climb down myself. And then the other reason was that, my sister, my younger sister, might get into difficulties too, because she's likely to follow me up that wall. So, my sister and I have always gotten along. She was like my shadow as we were growing up. We were always together, and it wasn't hard to imagine that she would want to try climbing the wall too. So anyway, I took my mum's advice that day, and we had a lot of fun. I didn't get into strife, and neither did my sister. And as we were leaving, Mum said, we could always come back when and try to climb to the top of the wall another time, like the older kids did. When we were both taller, my sister and I grew a bit taller later on. So we can see that these choices, they don't just relate to what we eat or what we do in our spare time. And psychologists have found that younger siblings, they regularly observe and emulate the behaviors of their older siblings. There's another quote here. They learn from their older siblings' skills and strengths, for better or worse. So older siblings have been shown to be effective instructors in a variety of complex tasks. Even without direct instruction, younger siblings regularly take notice of and often emulate their elder siblings' behaviors. And this comes from a book of studies specifically on the sibling relationships. So you could say that roughly about in the last 30 years, there's been increasing attention given to the sibling relationships. Previously, there's sort of research, family studies or human development psychology focused more on parent and child relationship or the relationship between spouses, between the parents themselves and the family. But increasingly in the last 30 years, researchers have recognized this, how this long-lasting relationship of close contact among siblings, especially during childhood, have this incredible impact on shaping a person throughout their life. Okay. Well, what this means is that, for the older sibling anyway, is that they should try to be the best role model that they can be. If the older sibling can be mindful of setting the right example for their younger siblings and, take advice from the elders on how to do so, they can be assured of cultivating the good deeds and the merits for good fortune. Now, here's a slightly different scenario. Let's imagine if we're the older sibling and our younger sibling is struggling with some maths homework, or they haven't quite finished revising for their exam tomorrow. We're the older sibling and we finished what we've needed to do. So should we, as the older sibling, should we just turn on the movie or go out to the park ourselves? It's clearly not a question of whether we can enjoy ourselves, enjoy the movie alone or go out to the park by ourselves. But it's a matter of whether we should. And this is because older siblings, they have to consider how their younger siblings might feel. The younger brother or sister might get distracted, or they might get upset because they can't join in on the fun just yet. Might reflect, wouldn't it be more fun to help them revise for the exam or to figure out those complicated maths questions and then hang out together? Not only would the younger sibling get more out of their studies, but they would really appreciate us waiting to, do something enjoyable with them. So, if we put ourselves in their position, wouldn't we feel the same way? Well, instead of doing whatever they want, whenever they want, the older siblings can try to think of the needs of the younger siblings. They can try to think one step ahead, to try to anticipate the problems or the the risks involved, the consequences of their intended actions. And these are all essential and very valuable skills. They're essential for our study, our work, throughout our life. So you could say that having a younger sibling helps us develop those valuable, essential skills from a very early age. And this is probably why it's been said that our siblings are the people who make us who we are. Now, what happens if our siblings have difficulties that we as the older sibling aren't equipped to deal with? They're not too sure what to do. And these difficulties might range from shyness or a lack of concentration, procrastination, could be overcoming a speech impediment or antisocial behavior. Let's say we've never come across this problem before. We're not sure what to do, how to help our sibling. And while we might care a great deal for our younger brother or sister, we're not too sure how to help them in the best way. Well, no one has all the answers, but what an older sibling can do is to consult the relevant professionals. And these could be doctors like the GP, or teachers, other mentors, or social workers who are qualified and experienced in assisting with various issues. They will either know or refer us to someone who does. Now, the examples we've looked at so far, with the cookie or the rock climbing or the study now, play later, what they show us is that the kind and caring choices of the older sibling can really help their younger siblings learn. What do they learn? They learn about how to love and care for others. Isn't that what being a good friend is all about? As the older sibling, you could be accumulating quiet merits without even knowing it. And why do I say the quiet merits? It's because no one outside your family might ever know or give you an award for being good to your siblings. So your efforts might remain unknown, the merits might remain unknown, but the rewards are certainly enormous. What do you gain? The older sibling gains a best friend for life in their younger siblings. It's no accident that they can cultivate, they're more able to cultivate these long, positive and long-lasting relationships with their classmates, with their colleagues, with their life partner. And why is that? Because they've learned how to be more considerate about the needs of others and, how to put others first before their own interests. Just like how parents will make sacrifices in raising their children. So those sorts of things, doing the right thing and being a dutiful older sibling can take years of learning and a lifetime of practice and getting it right. It isn't always easy. I don't think anything in life ever is, but it's always rewarding. It's rewarding on so many levels, to the older sibling themselves, as we've already discussed, to the younger sibling as well, to the whole family, the family as a whole. Now, there's another slide I'd like to share. And this goes to, developing and practicing the relationship skills, beginning in early childhood. Sibling interactions provide an arena for developing and practicing these relationship skills. Close, supportive sibling relationships may promote the qualities and skills needed for successful friend and romantic relationships. And the large amount of time siblings spend together, along with their family identity and shared experiences, often yield lifelong bonds. So older siblings can make best friends for life in their younger brothers and sisters. Just stop sharing. Now, people without siblings can also learn to look out for their cousins, their classmates, the people, the peers who live nearby, because you'll find that you can always do something to help out someone who's a bit younger or who is less able, less knowledgeable in some way. Now, aside from caring for the health and safety of younger siblings, the older sibling, it's also important that they share what they know with their younger brothers and sisters. And this is the instructional or mentoring aspects of their role as the friendly older sibling. Again, what an older sibling might need to teach their younger sibling will vary depending on the needs of the younger sibling, and depends on their age. Let's say when they're very young, it might be teaching them how to put a jigsaw puzzle together, or how to fold some laundry items. Later on, it might be showing them how to play a musical instrument, how to write an essay, or change a light bulb. Later on still, it could be teaching them how to cook healthy meals, helping them prepare for job interviews, and advising them on what would be appropriate to wear for the occasion. Well, at the core of this knowledge sharing, what's sort of parcel of the role of an older sibling to teach and show their younger siblings how to cultivate good ethical character. And this good ethical character will stand them in good stead, regardless of what they choose to do with their life. Whether they want to raise 3 children, a family of 3, or become a CEO. So whatever they choose to pursue. And this good ethical character might look a little bit like this. Could be showing them and instructing them on how to be honest, to admit that they've broken grandma's vase, how to be trustworthy. And this extends to being punctual, being on time for meetings and appointments, how to be patient and keep calm in emergency situations, like when there's a power outage all of a sudden, or there's heavy rains and the bathroom drain is overflowing with the rainwaters. How to be courteous, not just saying please and thank you, but how to pick up the phone, answer the phone and take a message. How to be self-motivated, like not having to be reminded to finish their assignments, whether that's for school or for their work. Being respectful, just as basic as keeping to the one side of the pavement when there are other pedestrians around. How to maintain a good temper. It's never right to slam the door or to resort to violence. How to keep healthy, as they say, early to bed, early to rise, and how to count their blessings, how to be grateful for what they have, the opportunities, the people around them, everything that they have in their life. So clearly, if you look at this list, we don't have to be Einstein, we don't have to be a rocket scientist to show and sort of impart these sorts of knowledge. Okay, I'll just stop sharing now. Okay, now sharing what we've learned is a bit like sharing good food, or like the best of friends. Older siblings are to share with the younger siblings all the useful things that they've learned throughout their life, and this applies to what they've known and learned both in and outside of the classroom. Now, this even extends to learning from texts like the Exalted Treatise. The older sibling simply needs to ask themselves, would their younger siblings, would their younger brother or sister benefit from learning how to cultivate good deeds, avoid the misdeeds to improve their life? Would it help help them be a better person? And if the answer is yes, then there's no reason why that the knowledge shouldn't flow to the younger siblings as well. Now, the older sibling might tell them directly by explaining the text, or everyone can listen together to the talks and discuss amongst themselves. And this is just one example. Of course, this obviously means that the older sibling has to educate themselves, and there's an element of ongoing personal development, what we would call ongoing self-cultivation or character cultivation. It doesn't mean that older siblings can't make mistakes. They are only human after all. But it does mean that the older siblings should try to do everything they can to help their younger siblings, their younger brothers and sisters, not to make the same or similar mistakes. It's a bit like if we were bushwalking and there's a slippery part of the path up ahead. If we know about that, but the people behind us, coming up behind us, they don't know, then, we would try to naturally let them know, alert them in some way. And the same, if there was some removable obstacle, we would try to remove the obstacle to avoid, becoming a trip hazard for other people too. So the same sort of logic applies to being the dutiful, friendly older sibling. If an older sibling has figured out how to use, let's say, keyboard shortcuts or how to work with Excel spreadsheets, then there's no reason why that good knowledge shouldn't flow through, shouldn't be shared with their younger brothers and sisters. If the older sibling has overcome some sort of difficulty at work, then they can share with the younger siblings, so their younger siblings can learn from their experience and, learn from the strategies and equip themselves so they're better prepared for the same or similar issues later on down the track. Now, at this point, an older sibling might say, isn't life a bit unfair? I'm the firstborn. How come I don't have any older siblings to learn first and then show and teach me? After all, who wouldn't want to make less mistakes in their life? Well, the reality is that older siblings have cultivated the causes to be born as the older siblings in their family. And that role, like with any role, comes with both positives and negatives. So yes, it can be really daunting and challenging to be the trailblazer. And I know people who have been the first in their family to, study at university level. But they're not alone. There are libraries of resources out there. There are lifetimes of knowledge and experience in our teachers, our mentors, our family elders to draw on. So you'd say on the upside, it can be all the more satisfying when we're able to figure something out ourselves. And then the older sibling, when they share that knowledge with their younger siblings, when they take the time to explain, they'll find that they have an even more clearer understanding of that knowledge. And they try to, having digested that and explained it in clear terms to somebody else. So by sharing what they know and learn, the older sibling is cultivating the good deeds, and they're bound to receive good fortune. Good fortune like intelligence, clear mind, wisdom. And, even if young siblings never bother to share what they have learned with their older siblings, the older siblings are likely to meet with others who are more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more than happy to assist and advise. Okay, let's imagine for a moment that you're the older sibling and you get 15 out of 20 in a maths exam. And you then teach your younger siblings who go on to achieve 20 out of 20 in the same maths exam. Well, clearly they've gotten 100%. It's a perfect score. So some older siblings might worry about their parents favouring or loving their siblings more than them. Maybe they might even be worried about their younger siblings not listening to them or respecting them anymore, because clearly the younger sibling who got a perfect score and their older sibling only got 15 out of 20. So what do you think? Well, actually, based on the Exalted Treatise, the older sibling doesn't need to worry at all. And, I say that for a couple of reasons. From their perspective, by fulfilling their responsibilities in being a dutiful older sibling, they're already cultivating the good deeds and the merits that will guarantee them good fortune in time. And it means that, the natural law of cause and effect means that when it comes time that they're in need of advice or guidance or some help, there will be someone to help them out in return. It doesn't have to be the younger sibling. It might not even be a person. The older sibling might discover a book or a database which happens to have the answers that they're looking for. The point that's the whole idea of the law of cause and effect. What sort of goes around comes around. Now, from the perspective of the younger sibling, and the worries about whether or not the younger sibling will continue to respect or listen to the older siblings, well, you can just think of it in this way. How would you feel if you had an older sibling to teach you how to answer all of the questions correctly? And wouldn't it be wonderful? By helping to teach their younger siblings all the correct answers, the older sibling is also showing their younger sibling, how to love someone with all of their heart, how to be kind and sincere and genuinely hoping that they do better. And the older sibling, because the older sibling who got only 15 out of 20, they went to the trouble of finding out all the correct answers and then teaching all those correct answers to their younger siblings. They didn't leave anything out. And I think most, if not all younger siblings would really appreciate that generosity and that kindness. And I think that's probably even more valuable than, the correct answers to all 20 questions. So that's what's priceless is the selfless example of the older sibling. And something that I think most, if not all, younger siblings will realize in time. They might not realize it at the time, but they will may not immediately understand and realize at the time, but they will realize in due course. Now, as for the parents, I'm sure all parents would really appreciate the help that the older sibling has given to their younger siblings in their studies or in life generally. I think when siblings are able to get along, when they can help support each other and work together, it really gives their parents peace of mind. And you can just imagine all of the tutoring expenses that the older sibling has helped the family to save. So this is the knowledge sharing part, and it clearly isn't limited to the school curriculum or university textbooks. Okay, and the last broad category is about, last but not least, is about the older sibling sharing what they have. As siblings are growing up, this might mean sharing stationery, toys, and clothes like hand-me-downs. But it also could mean sharing rooms like the bedroom and the study. And this helps to develop a sense of compromise, knowing and learning to take turns, taking turns and using, let's say, the stapler or using the same book. And certainly helps to develop our sense of being considerate, not doing what we need to, but being alert to the fact of not disrupting the concentration of our siblings in the same study room or not disturbing their sleep. And as I was growing up, I actually shared a bedroom and a study with my younger sister. And it taught me that I didn't need for everything to be mine and mine alone. In fact, it made more sense to share it with my younger sibling. Taught, I learned that, two people could share the one mirror. Two people shared the same wardrobe and use the same tea bag. Both of us could use the same clock to tell the time or use the same calendar to record our reminders. And it was certainly brought us closer together. It was more economical because mum and dad didn't have to buy, two of everything if they didn't need to. And we could then have more space in our house for other things. So it really made sense. And I remember, sharing clothes, having to share clothes with my sister meant that I learned to take better care of them. I suppose I started learning about this when I was maybe 3 or 4 years into my life, and I became consciously aware of having someone who would inherit my clothes. So this meant that I had to be very careful, not to get curry stains all over the front of my shirts. And not just be careful with my clothes, but being careful in general, so there wouldn't be holes or tears in the fabric, because I obviously needed to hand down the clothes in the best condition that I possibly could for my young sister. So it was a really good thing. When we were both quite young, I remember my dad teaching us to share things by having one person divide something. It could be like cutting an apple into half, and then having the other person, taking the first choice as to which half they would prefer. And obviously, some halves can be bigger than others. Now, what can be difficult, it probably sounds straightforward and sounds sensible, but what can be difficult is the following scenario. Imagine if you're the older sibling and your younger sibling accidentally loses a piece of the board game that you share, or accidentally rips a page in your book, and it's the book that you got for Christmas. Well, what should the older sibling do in these situations? Well, first, the friendly older sibling would not lose their temper. Second, they would try to help and show the younger siblings how to be a bit more careful. Certain items could be as basic as holding a fragile book with both hands. It might mean not leaning on the book, especially while you're trying to turn the page. It could be remembering to double check and sort of count the pieces, all the pieces of the board game, if they're the ones responsible for packing up the game and putting it away. It's really a learning process for everyone, not just the younger sibling, actually. And why I say that is because, if you think about it, what does the older sibling have to learn? What do they get to learn out of these situations? Really helps that from them, it can help them understand that helping others build up good habits takes time. And it can also take many timely, gentle reminders. So all of the above requires patience, as any parent will tell you. And the older sibling also gets to learn to value their family relationships more than possessions. The older sibling gets to learn to forgive and forget rather than dwelling in blame and resentment, which doesn't help any relationship. Well, the reality is that many things can be replaced or repaired, but hurtful words can't be unsaid. So, when parents would say, you only have one sister. And I know someone who has 4 siblings, and they tell me that all their siblings are fairly unique and they all contribute different things to her life. So, if we're lucky enough to be the oldest sibling, we just have to do the best we can to be a good friend to our younger brothers and sisters. I think a big key is for the older sibling to try to put themselves in the position of their younger siblings. That really helps to not lose your temper. But younger siblings, at the end of the day, they'll generally appreciate if their parents and their older siblings help them develop good habits. And they might not always say so. They might not even realize it at the time. And more importantly, the younger sibling can learn from the older siblings, love and patience and forgiveness, all these sorts of constructive attitudes. And as with any friendship, it's better to give more and take less. We want to expect more of ourselves and less from others. So the older sibling might try and ask themselves, is there anything I could have possibly done to try to prevent, careless behavior by my younger siblings? Now, I think that this idea of friendship, of being the older, dutiful older sibling, can be found in these words. And these words come from Master Shuden, who was a Confucian philosopher, lived in around the 2nd century before the Common Era. And the English translation goes like this: though blue dye comes from the indigo plant, it is bluer than indigo. Ice is made from water, but it is colder than water. The idea is that the blue colour used for dyeing traditionally was derived from the indigo plant, and the dye extracted from that plant will turn out bluer than the plant itself. And similarly, ice is derived from water, but is much, much cooler in temperature. So both the blue dye and the cold ice, they're metaphors that used to describe the situation when, as is often the case, the student or the protege, their achievements surpasses that of their teachers. And, it might be that their work takes the research in a particular field of scholarship or knowledge to the next level in some way. And the same applies to the parent and the child. So say, for example, the parent establishes a very successful small business, and the child is able to, expand it or diversify it, such that it becomes an interstate or an international success. So that's when the parent or teacher might proudly say that the blue comes from the indigo plant, or the ice is derived from water in Chinese. And certainly Master Shun's words have become proverbial. So you only need to say that, one short phrase. And those words sort of equally highlight the big-heartedness of the older sibling. So whether they're trying to be a positive role model or trying to be a good source of advice, a caregiver, or all of the above for the younger siblings, on a day-to-day basis, what they're doing is basically helping their younger siblings succeed and do better than them. When the older sibling makes a mistake, and they can learn from it, of course, but by sharing their experience that with the younger siblings, they get to learn and learn from that experience saves them making the same mistake. But that negative experience of making that mistake, it would have been all the more worth it. And just as how parents and teachers can feel proud of the achievements of their children and the students, older siblings feel proud of the achievements and accomplishments of their younger brothers and sisters, when they achieve and go on to bigger and better things. So, we never hear of any teacher teaching half the textbook to try to prevent the students knowing more than them. And so it should never be the case for older siblings. Older siblings obviously have nowhere near the life experience, the knowledge of teachers and parents, but they are generally around and they have maybe travelled a little bit further along the path of life. So older siblings can and should share all of the best lessons that they've learned with all of their heart. They should, be caring, look out for their younger siblings and share what they have. There's really no place in the relationship for jealousy. And I say this for two reasons. For one thing, if the older sibling helps their younger sibling achieve because they genuinely, sincerely hope they do better, chances are their younger siblings will feel grateful to them, right? Now, the second reason is that, because the older sibling has helped their younger sibling become a great person, don't even have to think about what success, later on, but they have good ethical character. Well, you could say that the older sibling has a share in all that the younger sibling achieves and contributes to society. So you can understand why this early education within the family is so important. If children grew up to be terrible and become a burden on society, their family elders, including their older siblings, would be held accountable for not educating them in the right way. And if the children, if the younger siblings, make a positive contribution to society, then the whole family would be honoured in the eyes of society. Now, given that siblings spend so much time together throughout their lives, it's inevitable that they have an impact on each other's lives, whether big or small, and even when they're not consciously thinking about doing so. So, what this passage from the Exalted Treatise reminds us is that we might as well use the opportunity to cultivate good deeds and accumulate great merits to bring benefit to ourselves, our family, and society as a whole. And that's why when it comes to the greatest good deeds, the family is where we can achieve the most. Just like being a dutiful older sibling, the best friend. And we certainly don't have to wait to grow old enough to get a job or to have a family ourselves. So I'll leave you with that thought. How to be the friendly older sibling. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I look forward to seeing you next week.